We're going into another era of Formula One in what's being called the biggest shake-up of the rules ever, 4 years after the last time they said this. Now, I'm not here to judge which rule changes are the biggest ever, but we are about to see a significant change in how we go racing compared to 2025, as well as a change in the language we use describing what's happening with these cars. I've already seen some commentators try and explain these changes in ways that are more confusing than helpful. I've heard it said that Overtake Mode is the new DRS, and no, it really isn't, and that's probably going to confuse everyone. So, I thought I'd make a little video just to help us all understand what we're going to see over the coming season as we transition to this new style. So the main headline changes are straight line mode / cornering mode, which is relatively simple to understand, as well as overtake mode, which is a little more complicated. But to understand these things, we have to understand why they exist and why they both exist as a byproduct of forcing these new power units to become more electric. From 2014 to 2025, we ran hybrid power units, which meant the power came from both a combustion engine and an electric motor. In that era, the combustion engine provided about a maximum of 850 horsepower, which I'm going to convert to 630 kilowatts for convenience. The electric motor, the MGU-K, delivered about 120 kilowatts of power maximally, so the electric motor only accounted for about 14% of the total power output. In 2026, the cars still run hybrid power units and still have a V6 turbo as their internal combustion engine. However, the combustion engine maximum power has been nerfed to around 400 kilowatts, and the MGU-K has been buffed to about 350 kilowatts maximum. This means the electric motor accounts for about 47% of the total power at full beans deployment, a significant change. Furthermore, previously the energy store, the battery essentially, could only store 4 megajoules of energy per lap from the MGU-K, and now it can store 8.5 megajoules a lap, or 9 megajoules in overtake mode, but we'll get into that. Now, you couldn't just shove this new power unit into last year's cars. Not because they wouldn't fit, but because the ability to push these cars would be ruined by their aerodynamics. Now, the reason F1 cars can corner extremely well is they generate a lot of aerodynamic downforce that pushes the cars into the ground and increases their grip at speeds. Now, the counter effect to this is these downforce producing aero parts also produce a lot of drag. Now, drag is essentially the car bodywork resisting the airflow like a parachute, and it takes a lot of energy to push through that. That's why there was always a balance in setting up a car to give grip on the corners without being draggy on the straights when you're trying to maximize top speed and acceleration. So overcoming drag takes a lot of energy, and these new cars are getting nearly 50% of that energy through the MGU-K. Now, the problem with that? The battery. At a full 350 kilowatts of power, the MGU-K will drain the full 8.5 megajoules of energy in about 24 seconds. Now, last year's car would take 33 seconds to drain its battery at full MGU-K power, but the difference there, of course, is without the MGU-K, last year's car still had 85% of its maximum power running off the combustion engine, or 630 kilowatts. Now, in 2026, the car would drop to just 53% of its total power, that 400k, leaving it looking very slow and vulnerable. So what's the solution? Active aerodynamics, which brings us to straight line mode and cornering mode. If you watched F1 previously, you knew it had DRS. The rear wing could flip back in designated parts of straights if a car was close enough to the car in front, and this would strip a large amount of drag from the chasing car and allow it to accelerate more readily to aid overtaking. Well, this year, both the rear and front wings can flip back, stripping the downforce from both wings. And not only that, the provision that you have to be close to the car in front is gone. All cars can do this on any straight-ish section of track deemed safe enough. And it will be for the entire straight, not just the designated area. It's no longer an overtaking aid, it's just pure drag reduction to allow these electric motors to power the car more efficiently, stopping the drag from sapping all the electric power too readily. Along with some aero efficiencies built into the regulations, these cars should be nice and slippery on the straights. But they still need all that downforce in the corners, so they'll flip the wings back up in the braking zones and turn the cars back into cornering mode in the corners. So, straight line mode on the straights for low drag, flip back wings, cornering mode in the corners for high downforce, high wings. And unlike with DRS, the rear wings currently have no limit on how flip back they can be as long as straight line mode and cornering mode always return to the same 2 positions. Now, we've seen much more open wings in testing this year in straight line mode compared to DRS last year. Ferrari even tried flipping theirs upside down at one point. So yes, straight line mode is a drag reduction system, but they've chosen not to call it DRS because I think people think of DRS as an overtaking aid. But this is really in service of keeping the power unit in reasonable shape. Okay, great, I hear you say. So what is overtaking mode, and why are some commentators calling it the new DRS? Well, overtaking mode is an overtaking aid, and it was likely introduced in fear that without DRS, the chasing car would get stuck like it used to in the old days without any tricks up its sleeve. So this is kind of what it is, a trick up its sleeve. I previously mentioned the energy store, the battery, can only be charged up with 8.5 megajoules of energy over a lap, to be used over the next lap. And this is true in normal mode. But in overtake mode, which is activated if the car is less than a second behind the car in front at a designated line on the track, the chasing car can now charge an extra 0.5 megajoules per lap, bringing the total energy store up to 9 megajoules. Now, as you can see, this isn't a huge difference, but it is some difference. On top of that, the car in overtake mode can deploy a bit more energy under certain circumstances, and that is a little more complicated on paper, but I'm going to draw you a nice graph so you can see the differences. So let's think about the total maximum power a car can deploy as it accelerates down a straight. Up the vertical axis, we're going to track total power, and on the horizontal axis, we're going to show how this changes as the car gets faster and faster. So as I've said, the combustion engine is capped at about 400 kilowatts of power, whatever the circumstances, so this is a nice straight line. Whatever the speed, the engine is allowed to churn out about 400 kilowatts. Now, there are a few rules, a sort of working combination that govern how the MGU-K can deploy power. 1. It can never exceed 350 kilowatts. So on top of the combustion engine, that's a total of around 750 kilowatts, or about 1,000 horsepower. 2. When the car is below 340 kilometers an hour, the power of the MGU-K cannot exceed 1,800 minus 5 times the car's speed. Okay, so don't worry too much about that little equation, but know that it draws this line on the graph. So between 340 kilometers an hour and where this line meets our maximum 350 kilowatts, we get this drop off in power. 3. Between 340 kilometers an hour and 345 kilometers an hour, the power drops off more steeply. I'll put the equation on the screen, but the graph will do the work, see? So 4. Above 340 kilometers an hour, the MGU-K must deliver no power at all. Okay, that was a complicated way of essentially saying that as you accelerate beyond about 290 kilometers an hour, the electric power must drop away until it's delivering no power at all from 345 kilometers an hour upwards. And this is kind of okay. The acceleration will be dropping off anyway, so you don't want to waste all the battery at this point. However, in overtake mode, the car is allowed to use full electric power for longer, not starting to drop off until you're at speeds of about 338 kilometers an hour and not going to zero until you're at 355 kilometers an hour. So in theory, the chasing car has a bit more total power to play with on the straights, and as these cars power their way down a long straight, the chasing car will come good at these higher speeds and be able to pull alongside. Now I say in theory, because in reality these cars seem to be quite energy starved over a lap. Now what does that mean? It means cars are using up more of their energy than they'd like and probably won't have enough energy to get all the way down longer straights without losing all their electrical power. So maybe overtake mode will be a bit mute because they just won't have the energy to use it. In fact, you are quite likely to see cars lifting and coasting a lot earlier on straights than they used to, even when everything's fine. You'll also see them taking corners slower than you used to. Why? Because they need to recharge. To remind you how the hybrid power unit works, as I said, the combustion engine and the MGU-K are feeding power to the rear wheels, but the car also needs to recharge the battery over the course of the lap. This can happen in a few ways. 1. Under braking, the MGU-K goes into reverse and sucks energy out of the car's drive. This means a chunk of the braking force comes not from the brake discs themselves, but from the MGU-K recharging the battery. Secondly, the combustion engine itself can charge up the battery. Literally, instead of all its power going into the car's drive, some of it can be diverted to charging up the battery. So you have drivers with their foot to the floor, but not going at full speed because some of the engine power is charging the battery instead of driving the car. Some people are a bit up in arms at the sound of this for several reasons, but I think it's worth seeing how it plays out. And it will play out differently at different tracks too, depending on how many strong braking zones there are, the length of the straights, the nature of the corners, etc. And I think what we're going to see is multiple strategies played out, not over the course of stints like tyres, but lap to lap. Save some energy here in order to make an attack or defence on the next lap or the next corner. Which corners will drivers charge on and which will they push? We're going to see speed variability, and we're not yet sure how that will play out. So I'm reserving judgment until we've had a good quarter of the races. But let me know what you think. I hope you're not too influenced by the panic and hysteria I've seen from some people, and we'll give things some time to play out. And then we panic and get hysterical. And I'm sure you have lots of opinions on the changes being made in F1, but it's far from the only sport where the fascination and controversy ends with the on-track action. And that's why I found it so interesting watching Beyond the Bleachers, a 3-part series that gets deep into the nitty-gritty of why stadiums in North America are so different from their European counterparts. I actually really enjoyed seeing how their relative size, infrastructure and heritage connects so deeply to their cities, their fans and the economic interest looming over them, reflecting something way beyond the sports they host. It made me start to think a lot more deeply about some of F1's more hallowed grounds. Throughout Beyond the Bleachers, you'll probably recognise a lot of the cultural business decisions running deeply through the changes in Formula 1 in the last decade as more American influences permeate its once deeply European roots. Beyond the Bleachers is one of a whole host of really cool Nebula originals. Now, Nebula is an actual home for thoughtful, passionate creators where you'll find ad-free, genuinely interesting videos that range from the nichest special interest made entertaining to prestige, comedy productions made with intent. And that's the through line really. Nebula is full of real, human people making quality shows that they are passionate about. And it shows. So, if you want to watch Beyond the Bleachers and explore the genuinely broad range Nebula has to offer, you can get 50% off a Nebula subscription with my link go.nebula.tv/chainbear. That's just $30 a year or $2.50 a month. Click the link or scan the big QR code and you can start watching right now. Thank you so much for watching. So it's been a little while, but sometimes you need a little break. I'm probably going to be a bit less frequent than in my heyday, but let's see, eh? And if you want to see me playing mystery games, I've been quietly recording my gaming over at Chain Bear Plays for a couple of months. So see you soon.